Right, the first question, which is relatively interesting considering how professional we are right now, is what exactly is Cinegize?
Oh, Mike?
Yeah. The man who helped write it maybe answers it.
Yeah, so, I mean, Cinegize is the brand name applied to the software for a KVM solution, so a KVM over IP. So obviously, you know, KVMs have been around for a great many years, but traditionally and generally they were, cabled initially, like kind of VGA analogy things, and they would physically switch, and then later kind of DVI and HDMI or fiber optic. But in all cases, these things were always, the video signal cut through a switching box, and then later, PS2 and USB mices. Cut in such a way. Cinegize is the pure software equivalent of that. So if you imagine an amalgamation of VNC or TeamViewer and a traditional KVM, you get Cinegize. So we use the Daniel2 codec to take a screen from a source PC, which might be a machine in a rack or might be a workstation, and we use that to output a pristine quality original kind of UHD 5060, targeting high-end CAD/CAM workflow. It outputs that screen and then lets you remote that not just to a control station, so a single PC can then kind of remote slave that. Because it still uses RTP and multicast technology, it enables you to actually then amplify it and duplicate it, so you can actually play it on multiple screens at a time. So
that was one of the other questions, how Daniel2 actually fitted into that.
Yes, so Daniel2 does the encoding of, so we get the picture of the PC, which is happening there. We literally have an HDMI lead plugged into an HDMI output card on the tiny little box there, and then that's grabbed and encoded to Daniel2, which is very low latency and high speed, but can also work even on lower powered machines at higher rates, and that then
bless you.
I nearly avoided it, and then it didn't. Yeah, it didn't. So Daniel2 is used as the encoding format because it's very light. We can be running that process on a machine that's busy trying to be a high-end CAD/CAM machine or a high-end video editing station and not get in the way, because the important thing is you don't get in the way. If anyone's ever used things like TeamViewer or VNC, you know that not only can the quality not be great, because often these things are optimized for running over constrained bandwidth, but also they can add quite a lot of load on a machine. So when they start transmitting, if you put more video on, the machine starts to bog down, often because of the remoting software. With Daniel2, the idea is, even at 4K 60 res on an NVIDIA board, we can just use a couple of percent of the NVIDIA board to be encoding that, and we can do that on the GPU, so we can stay out the way of the machine, which is important. So that then answers what's Daniel2 got to do with Cinegize.
Great. So you've always been IP software based. You've always pushed things like 8K. So what next?
That sounds like a question for Simon.
Probably not.
After 8K, 16.
I was going to say
obviously.
16 comes after.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Apart from the obvious
Counting
16.
in powers of 2. Yeah.
But then we take over the world.
Yeah, world domination, obviously. Yeah. Collect on the pants.
Traditional
Yeah. I mean, probably we're just coming off the back of a fair amount of technology change with GPU pipelining, internal process changes, the way that we bring things to market in terms of continuous delivery. So off the back of all of those technology changes and process changes and introduction of stuff like SRT, I would like to hope we would have a year or two of kind of consolidation, stabilization, where we take the rather a large amount of things that are good and make them better, instead of saying, cool, let's have 8 new things.
Yeah.
So is this...
But then have you met Jan?
Well, exactly.
Eight more things, please.
But that does lead me nicely on to professional services.
Yes.
And obviously this is something that
that
is rather unique to what we do.
So professional services is the sort of team that I head up, and it's an opportunity for people to use Cinegy resources effectively to help them solve problems they're facing within a deployment, a project, an ongoing solution or even a proof of concept to a customer. So it's just sometimes our customers or partners have limited technical resources or have no technical resources at all, and they can use Cinegy to fulfill those gaps, basically, within the team's knowledge or their expertise, or add extra resource when it's required. So we've had customers who have needed to do a demo to a customer at very short notice. They haven't had any available staff themselves. So they've called upon our professional services team to provide someone who can run a demo of the Cinegy software to their customer, basically, and provide that expertise. So whether it's at the very beginning of a project where they want to do system architecture and requirements gathering, or all the way through to we want you to install and configure the software for us, we can sort of cover that whole range of solutions for people. Or if you want custom development. So sometimes people are like, hey, it'd be great if you had this feature in your product. We would work with them to capture the scope of the item and then work out what the cost would be to implement that into the product, and then agree a route forward with a customer to deliver that for them. So we're not fixed on you can only have what we say we're going to put in. We're always open to suggestions from people to say, this is really cool and we think you should have it. And sometimes we'll agree and say, actually, yeah, it would be really cool, and we'll work on it and it will be in the next release. Or if you can't wait that long, then you can always pay to have the item added to that product much quicker, for example. So that's sort of professional services in a nutshell, really. It's just a group of people within Cinegy that can help deliver extra things on top of products, basically.
Great. So it is only software. Obviously, software's super easy to do and everything else. So can you actually buy it? Can you buy it e-commerce, for instance? Is that something you're looking into?
So you can already buy some of our products straight through the Cinegy homepage, basically. So we already offer particular packages as direct sales, effectively, through the Cinegy website. So things like Cinegy Solo and Duo and Quad, for example, which offer a fixed number of licenses that can be used for one or more products in the bundle, you can buy those straight through the Cinegy website now. You don't need to go through a reseller to get that. So, yeah, whether we would expand that offering, I'm not sure whether that's something you would want to do, because it would tend to devalue the sort of services that partners can offer in helping to capture requirements from customers and things. But yeah, certainly if someone's got a single channel they want to do, they don't need to interact with us at all. If they don't wish to, they can buy our software, go away, install it and use it and just be happy. Absolutely.
I also heard something about this cloud thing.
Oh yeah, and so again, we're on the Amazon and Azure marketplaces, so if someone wants to deploy in the cloud, they can easily just go straight to those marketplaces and find Cinegy there, and just, again, doesn't need to interact with us. They can just pay per hour to deploy a playout in the cloud straight away with a pre-configured system, basically.
Excellent. So we've talked a lot today about version 14 of Air. But we heard also from David of Canis Media. He thinks he's got version 12. Can you go straight from 12 to 13? Do you have to do 12, 13, 14? If you're on version 10,
Sure. Well, there's always so there's no 13. We just didn't like that number. It was mean to us when we were at school, so we decided to ignore it. But absolutely, you can go straight from 12 to 14. If there is something, absolutely. So if there is, but if there is something that we've changed within the product, which means that there are considerations to the deployment, we will include that as a breaking change note with the release, effectively. So you'll have the release notes for the product. There will be a breaking change notice that would go with that. So when we went from Air 11 to Air 12, we moved from registry-based channel configurations to XML-based channel configuration. So we made a note to say, when you go from 11 to 12, you will need to reset up your channels, basically, because the configurations will be lost. So yeah, absolutely, you will always be able to move up within the products, and you could even skip a version. If you're on 11 at the moment and you wish to go straight to 14, then you can absolutely do that. But there may be considerations regarding the installation that you would need to take into account from that software.
and engage professional services, maybe.
Absolutely, we're always there to help.
Okay, let's be slightly, not as serious. What are your favourite Cinegy products each, and why?
Want me to go? Well, I haven't actually spoken yet, so it's probably about time. I get first choice. So my favourite product, unfortunately, is being used over there at the moment, and we're just about to bring it back into life.
What,
it
Facebook
was
Live?
put to sleep. Not Facebook Live, no, but Cinegy Live, which is the software vision switcher, which has been perfectly streaming everything, including sound, which we've had a few issues with. But we think we've got to the bottom of that one now. But that traditionally was where I started in Cinegy, and we're just about bringing it back to life, and you should see it starting to appear on the input to Air at some point in the not too distant future. It does. But for those people who can't hear Andrew at the back of the room, it remains part of the TV pack. Yeah. So I'll just reiterate what he's saying, because you need to be on mic, apparently.
Okay.
Okay. So I did get a word in at least. Here we go, Mike.
Okay, next then. For me, I mean, I would probably go with. I quite like the Cinegy desktop still. To a certain degree, that's where I started with Cinegy, like 15 years ago when it came at the BBC for Blue Planet, and I was working with those productions. So it's evolved along its way, but it's the product that's been with Cinegy the longest. Basically, it's sort of where Cinegy started. It's perhaps not at the forefront of what Cinegy does today, with Playout being more of the favourite. But there's so much you can do with it, and so much that it can do that people still want to use it now, like Child of Our Time, for example, like 20 years later. So I think it just has so much value, and it integrates with all the other products that, I think that's probably my personal favourite.
Thank you.
Oh, which one of your kids is the favourite? I've been literally, this is the hardest question anyone's asked me, like anything like this, because where to go? I mean, Cinegy Root was the thing that was the most confusing product that we ever had when I started. I'm like, why and what? And it's gone through that whole journey to, actually, I would be really scuppered without that once I try and do anything more complicated. So kind of like moved most positions in my heart would be Root, and then because no one's picked this one yet, probably Synergy Capture, because that was when I started 10 years ago, the first product that hadn't even slightly existed beyond we need to do something about ingest was Capture, and so it's been fantastic to kind of see that get out there, get used on some really high-end projects, and then hand it over to Michael. And actually, what was really cool about it is I've stepped back, and now it carries on. I could never touch it again, and it will continue getting better. That also gives me the excuse to then mention the fact that, like, it's so, while we talk about Air, and we talked a lot about Air during this, like, Jason just dropped 200 of the darn things in at MLB in the States. And that's a pretty huge deployment, doing some really cool work over there for the baseball. It's like, wow. And it just went in and it just worked. And so the guys have spent, when I talk about trying to enter a consolidation phase, the last 4 or 5 years of Capture has just been endlessly bulletproofing it. So now it's like, you don't even think about it. It just works. Like, your storage is, you can let your entire SAN reboot while Synergy Capture is recording to it, and it carries on and recovers. And that's the kind of stuff that happens when you then just leave a team of developers working on it saying, just keep making it more bulletproof. No, the SAN isn't supposed to reboot every day, but it does. So what can you do about that? Yeah. And so I'll award Capture that one for, but obviously I love all of them. With the possible exception of Live. Yeah.
That's what I
yeah. So there we go.
Thank you very much. Those were all the questions. Does anybody have any questions?